Okay, so here we go. I wasn't quite sure that I was going to do this video today, but I decided to do it because it's important to me. I've been told by some people in my comments who are disappointed that I would have this type of conversation. And I have to say, I believe that I use my platform responsibly. I believe that I use my platform in a way that's beneficial to our community. I'm not always right, but I try to think things out ahead of time. And if I make a mistake, then I believe that I'm entitled to make those mistakes. And so I hope that this isn't one of those mistakes. But um, our climate, the political climate, is just very, very abrasive right now. I can acknowledge that. I think that's for good reason. I am a, I'm, I consider myself liberal, progressive. I'm a Democrat, registered. Um, I know that people switch parties. I know that people vote sometimes on one issue or over another. But I really wanted to figure out and talk to some people who might be able to bring me closer to really understanding why they are voting for Trump. And that's not to bash them as individuals. I can certainly respect someone as an individual and disagree with their choice. I do think that we should be at a point that we can have conversations, civil conversations with people and disagree. I think that's something that we are going to need to do after the fourth, after the third. Um, but either way, regardless of who ends up winning, we are probably, our country will be best served if we immediately turn and listen to the voices of everyone else who didn't win. You know, so if Trump wins, then it'd be great if his supporters would turn and listen to what we need as a country. And so I just want to put it out there. I believe in full equality for queer people, for people of all genders. I'm all 100% a staunch advocate in making the changes that need to be made so that people are safe, to not only physically safe but also economically safe, spiritually safe, uh, safe in a climate sort of way. I just don't want to be one of those people that only talks to people who think just like me. And so I'm going in. I decided to invite some people onto my channel to have a conversation. I wanted them to be everyday people, sort of just in my life. So I put out a social media posting asking for people who are self-described Trump supporters or Republicans to volunteer to talk to me. And I chose two people that I think would be well-spoken and want to engage in an open sort of dialogue. And so we are about to have that conversation. I have Paul and Chris, Chris I've actually known for a while. I didn't know that he was a Republican. That was a discovery for me. And Paul, I'm just meeting today. And so I want everyone to be engaged. And I want you to feel free to have comments, ask questions in the comment. I'll do my best to answer them. You can say your own opinion. Please keep this, but I will be deleting comments that are overtly abusive or threatening. I want to get some understanding. I don't know if there's anything more for me to understand, but I'm going to try my best. And so with that being said, please welcome Chris and Paul. Paul, just to introduce you to my audience, please tell me what you do, where you are quarantining from, and how you identify and your pronouns. That's a lot. Can you do it? Go.
It is a lot, no problem. So my name is Paul. I am 32. I am in Kansas City. I identify as male. I am gay. Nurse. I am an independent, and I plan on voting Republican this year.
All right. And your pronouns are he,
I
him?
apologize. He and him.
Okay, awesome. And then we have Chris. Hi, Chris.
Hello. It's so weird to
Tell us,
be here
it is, well, I'm hoping that you're
on this
comfortable.
side.
Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, you're in your own place, so hopefully you're feeling comfortable. Hello, darling. Tell us everything about you in 50 seconds. Where you're quarantining from, what your pronouns are, how you identify, both personally and politically, and anything else you want to tell us.
All
Zodiac
right.
sign? I don't know.
My name is Chris. I'm 32. I'm from Queens, New York, and I'm voting Republican because I'm a small business owner and it's going to keep the American dream alive.
And what are your pronouns?
I am he and him, and I am gay. I have a YouTube channel, and I'm an entertainer. And really, if this year is really my year, gosh darn it, I want to keep the most of it that I can.
Okay, I hear that. Um, so I just want to jump right in to the conversation. I think it's really when I spoke with both of you, one of the first things that you both acknowledged and mentioned to me is that you wanted to make sure that it was that you were at least cognizant of the political climate these days, and that things can get really personal and vicious with rhetoric and with the way people speak with each other. I can imagine that there's probably a particular um, sort of sensitivity being someone who's planning on voting Republican. And I would imagine, I don't want to assume, but I would imagine that you have friends and people around you who are queer. And it's no secret that there's lots of other gay people who are voting always, but definitely vocal about voting Democrat this year in the 2020 election. And so I think they've always said, don't talk politics, but this year in particular, the climate, well, not just this year, but leading up to this year, with this, in this current, under this current administration, I've seen in my adult life, some of the more uh, bold speech coming from all different sides, saying all different things, but always very personal and very heated. And so you both expressed that you didn't want uh, to be engaged in that when making the decision to do this conversation. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you very much for agreeing to sit down with me and talk with me. I know that most conversations like this would probably be very filled with vitriol and, um, you know, hurt feelings. But I think that there's a way to do it that's full of compassion and understanding. My goal for having this conversation is to find some common ground and honestly to get more information from about what it's like to be first a person who plans on voting for Trump, but second of all a Republican, which those two things aren't always the same, or an independent. But I mean, I think I have a little bit of an idea of what it's like to be an independent, but I'm here for your experience, Paul. And then also a gay person who is planning on voting red this year. And so uh, I don't know any of those experiences. I don't imagine that uh, either of you know what it's like to be a Black trans woman who plans on voting for Biden, but I'm here to provide that as well. And I'm ready to jump into the conversation. But just know that I'm extremely grateful that you have decided to engage with me on the conversation. And also know that I consider myself very fortunate to have people who engage in my platform and you know people who are following what I'm doing who seem to be the most compassionate and most open and most willing to learn. I have no idea how they identify politically, most of them, but I'm sure that they will be as interested to hear, to genuinely hear your experiences as I am. And so thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. So let's jump right in. Like I said we've been jumping a lot. And so I know that you are both obviously planning on voting for Trump this time around. I want to know, just so we can get a little bit of background, because I think a lot of this, a lot of what goes into why people vote a certain way has, I would like to think, has a lot to do with who they are, what their history is, how they connect with other things in the world. And so I want to help my viewers get to know that a little bit. And also you can help me, get to know it a little bit. And so um, I'm curious from both of you, and you can expand, and this is a conversation. It's not really an interview, but I'm going to prompt some of the questions since it's my channel. Is your political stance that you have today, is it aligned with your family's political history, just generally?
Yeah, 100%.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? Both of you. I just want to hear from both of you.
You can go first.
Well, yeah, my whole family, for the most part, is Republican. I grew up, and both my parents owned businesses. My father owned an auto repair, auto center, tire center in Astoria. We still have that business today.
I've seen it.
Yes, you've been there. And my mom had a beauty salon. And I grew up with them working all the time, and we really weren't able to do a lot of family things that much because they were always working all the time, and it was stressful, it was expensive, they were and it comes from that, I think, worrying about money and worrying about those things and seeing them struggle through that and what high taxes can do. I
Mhm.
think it really can kill the American dream. And it has, we've had good years, we've had bad years. And right now it's definitely like a bad year. It's
Mhm.
been a
I don't want to
few,
get too far ahead though. I
yes,
want
yes,
to
yes.
just kind of stay with your family
But yeah,
history.
so yeah, I come from that. And did I answer the question? Is it Paul's turn?
Yeah, you did. You
Yeah.
did. And Paul, how about you?
So, in regards to my parents' political beliefs, my parents are staunch Republicans. I identify as independent because I really do care about LGBTQ issues. And that is obviously not on my parents' radar because my dad is actually a pastor. And it's not just like Methodist pastor or Lutheran, he's a Pentecostal pastor. So, one of those very controversial ones that not really friendly of the gays. I was actually one of the reasons I went from Republican to independent was the way that I was actually treated by the church whenever I officially came out, and having to be dismissed from playing piano and being on the praise and worship team, which was my
Oh my God, praise and
journey of
worship.
my faith.
Okay, let's talk about that. That is the entertainment of the church service, everyone. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
So it's so good. So I definitely stepped out of my faith, stepped out of my politics. I'm at a point now, which we can get into in a little bit, where I've forgiven the church and I've been able to have those honest conversations with the church instead of having the, well, you treated me bad, screw you. It was a, you hurt me. This is how I was hurt. This is how I feel your message is offensive and hurtful for other people like me. This particular conversation is going to be beneficial just because I've already done it as a gay man to the church. Only thing I'm doing now is being a gay man that's conservative to a liberal party.
Mm-hmm. Uh, I do want to kind of well, I'd like to ask both of you. Um, and it's quite clear, Paul, that your sexual identity, your sexuality is, I guess, an issue that doesn't necessarily connect the way that you would like it to across the board with your whole family and with their political beliefs, as you just said. Uh, do you, what made you? It sounds like you've come to a little bit of a headway with regards to the church. So, is it possible that you? Why independent? Why not Republican now? Is that something that you think you can, in the future, register as a Republican now, knowing that you've made peace with the landscape in regards to gay versus gay and how it may relate to Republican and how it may relate to religion, to Christianity?
So repeat the question again. Would I be able to see
So
myself
are
going from
you
independent to Republican?
yes.
Um, Honestly, I think I would probably still stay an independent. I will say I voted mostly Republican and third party, but I still very much identify as an independent. And just because somebody runs for a Democratic Party doesn't mean that I feel like they're going to stand true on their democratic principles. And likewise for the Republican Party. So it's not necessarily
The,
about the party, but the person.
so has being I'm just generally interested. I don't mean to keep going at you. What is the benefit behind being independent, registered as an independent, and have independent party uh, candidates? Have you voted for them, and have you found what you? Has there been a payoff to being a registered independent? I'm just curious, like what the.
I voted third party last year. Donald Trump was nowhere on my radar. He was he was second to last on my list. Being an independent, I'm a walking oxymoron. I am a gay man that identifies as conservative, so the LGBT people really don't understand me. I am a gay man that's stepped back into my faith. I had a falling out with it, but I'm stepping back into it despite the church's views against it. So I'm used to being the odd duck for both parts, but I'm also able to understand either party. And for that, I feel like I can be a voice for both people.
Do you think that, I guess, okay, I don't want to veer too much into a different conversation, but religion obviously does play a role in why people make the decisions that they make, especially the political decisions. And so feel free to chime in on that as we continue with the conversation. And Chris, I didn't mean to ignore you or assume that you weren't religious, but Paul, of course, offered that information with regards to the history and the family. And so I am curious, just on a very, 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 very base level, because we will get into it. So just like one sentence, how the quick answer of how you tell people that you are both gay and voting Republican and voting for Trump, like what's your sell to get other, if you were in a position to invite other gay people to vote for Trump. Hey everyone, just a quick reminder that this week's Pep Talks, I have special guest Sasha Velour, and we're chatting about the movie Boomerang. We're moving this week's episode to Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern so that we can all put our full attention to the election. Once again, I hope you'll join me and Sasha here live on Twitch this Wednesday, the 4th at 7 p.m. Eastern. See you then. Because I'm guessing that if you're going to vote for Trump, you would like as many people as possible to vote for Trump so that he can become the president again. And so if you had the opportunity to vote, to convince friends, which I'm sure you have, to vote for Trump, not convince, but give them the reasons that you think that it would be a good idea that they consider voting for Trump. Okay. If you were able to do that right now, what is that one or two like tagline that you could say? Because what we've heard just on a very, 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 very surface level from Tiffany Trump last week that she was informing the gay community, the LGBT community, that Trump has been the best president for all LGBT people's lives. They are also very willing to tell all Black people that Trump has been the best person for them, best president for them, without really offering that much evidence or anything. So, what's your version of that?
Um,
Both.
I'll go first. Okay. So I really think that, especially in New York, when Trump says law and order, and I don't want to say, like, so Black Lives Matter, do matter. And we also do need a lot of prison reform.
Hmm.
But at the same time, we need a lot of other reform in the neighborhoods, in the inner cities that need it. And all of that does need to be federally funded. And I know that technically that is a democratic principle. But the way that the movement has gone about defunding the police in New York City, um, along with the horrible leadership here, has led for an extremely unsafe environment. Murders have gone up in the city. It's Police officers aren't doing their job anymore because they're not
Wait,
really
hold on.
willing.
Can can you tell me, as a gay person to another gay person? Let's go there first before I know that I spoke about Trump mentioning Black people, but I want
Yeah.
to hold off on the people of color piece. I want to speak specifically to LGBT equality and issues and how that fits
Well,
with this
our
platform.
people have been discriminated against, beat, killed since the beginning of America. And honestly, we need law and order on our streets, so this way we're
Hmm.
safe. Regardless of race, regardless of anything, we need to be safe. Families
Okay.
need to feel safe. Um,
Hmm.
and and everybody needs to feel like they could want to believe whatever they want to believe, even if that does mean that they're not going to make our cake for our wedding. That's okay. We'll go to the place down the street. I don't care. They have the right to believe what they want to believe. It's America. If that's what they believe at the end of the day,
So that's a reason why other other gay people who are not planning on voting for Trump, you that's a good reason for them to vote for Trump. I'm trying to get to that
yes,
piece. Like,
because we
why do you think
have
it's a good reason to
because
vote for Trump?
we have come such a long way. We are the new normal. We do not need to be any different from anyone else, and we believe
Okay.
what we believe, and someone else has the right to believe what they believe, even if it is
Okay.
against us. They do have the right, as an American citizen, by what the Constitution has said, to
Mhm.
believe what their religion says. And that is on them, and that is on karma to fix.
Okay. Paul, what
So
is your
your original question was the selling point to how I would initiate a conversation or convince people.
yeah.
Um, so it's hard for me to have that conversation just because I feel like whenever I've tried to bring up politics or I'm in any room where the discussion is going on about politics, it's really not a civil discussion. It's usually
Mhm.
one, a Trump bitch bash. Number two, it's
Mhm.
the same shared opinion, just somebody saying it more articulate. Then there's going to be some asshole in the room that has the latest survey or data or NPR thing to make themselves a little bit more elevated so they can be the most knowledgeable about the debate. So I
Mhm.
don't really find
You don't
myself
have
having a
experience with
lot
it.
of those
But look, Paul,
discussions.
now's your opportunity because none of
So, what
that's
I would
happening.
say in regards to the Liberal Party, I love the fact that the Liberal Party celebrates Black people. I love that it celebrates gay people. I love that it celebrates Latin people. I'm glad that it celebrates the trans people. The reality is that Black people vote for Trump. Gay people vote for Trump. Trans people vote for Trump. Latin people vote for Trump. So I feel like this Liberal Party, and I feel like those voices have been absolutely muted. So it's a party that celebrates diversity, but expects a conformity to this uniform political platform. And if you don't, you're unintentionally biased, you're unintentionally racist, you're canceled, or it's anything that's going to mar or devalue your character. And I
Can I
don't
ask you a
stand for that.
question? Can you or
Of
do you
course.
see um, a, a, a an enthusiastic celebration of Black people and queerness and transness and Latinxness from the Republican Party?
Do I see them celebrating it? I feel like Now, I'm not going to, I can only speak as a gay person. I do not get to speak for the Black people. I don't get to speak for the women. I do speak for the gay people that are voting for Trump. And I feel like we celebrate Trump, but we also hold him accountable for his actions. We are not thrilled. I think
No,
there's
but
far
does
better.
Trump, does the Republican Party, you said the Democratic Party and the Liberal Party celebrates, and you love that the Liberal Party, I'm guessing you're talking about liberal friends, but also uh, politicians and sort of the front-facing aspects of the party at large. Celebrate Blackness, queerness, women, and people of color. Do you feel that that's something that the Republican Party, I'm not asking, is there a Black person that votes for Trump? I'm asking, do you feel as though that same energy comes from the Republican Party as a whole? In the same way that it does from the Liberal
Unfortunately,
Party?
no.
I don't think, but when it comes to the Republican Party and the things that they celebrate, I don't think they celebrate race or anything like that, really. It's more of a streamlined approach to
Yes.
government. It's
Hmm.
not really, they're not celebrating Irish people, they're not celebrating Black people, they're not celebrating anybody really.
The policy trumps the demographic.
Yeah, and it's and they're
I
not.
do. Oh, go ahead.
No, continue.
So I get that, and I think one of the big pieces here, like we're obviously in the United States. Anybody watching? Clearly, we're voting for Trump, unless surprise, he's also running for president in another country, which could happen. Um, I I do think that there is. I think one, not the elephant in the room, but the piece that often gets missed here is the the American way. And so let's just back up a little bit. Like, what does it mean to be an American to you, Chris and Paul?
Um, for me, being an American is having the right to do what I want to do, regardless of anybody else's feelings. It's having the right to be able to dream whatever ridiculous dream I want to do in this world, and be able to do it and hopefully profit off of it and make lots of money. Because at the end of the day, when I have lots of money, I'll be able to help other people, and it could be a beautiful thing, and I'll have more of it to help. And that's what I think being an American is being able to create something and then pay it forward with sharing and doing things with that money.
Um, okay, Paul.
Being an American, I have a good job. I get to have the right to worship how I want to. I have the right to vote as I wish. I have the opportunity to be immersed in a variety of cultures and a variety of language. And America is such a hodgepodge. So, as much as people want to travel overseas and have all these cultural experiences, you can also find those right here in the heart of America.
Hmm. Okay. For me, I'm going to be really, honest with you. This is quite candid. Growing up as a young person, even though I was born here, family's been here since we came over on boats, you know, and were enslaving. Uh, being what I saw growing up and kind of the images that I took in, because I think a lot of the images that we not only think information that we get from our families, but also things that we see on movies and television and entertainment, those things do play a part in what we think and know and feel about ourselves, our surroundings, and all of those things. And so when I was growing up, the thought of what it meant to be an American, when someone said all American, to me that meant blonde hair, blue eyed, Anglo or white, not black, not queer. And I don't know if I'm the only person who got that message. Maybe I am. I doubt it. I do think that other people got that message. that all American meant that, because that was who was on the covers and the boxes and the TV shows and the commercials, the products. That was what was represented. And then anything else, a person of color, obviously a queer person, did feel very much like other or exotic. Um, and that was both all. I mean, I didn't really have an idea of politics until much later, but that's what America meant to me growing up. That if you were that image, then you were not questioned. It was, you were already the idea of America. And anything outside of that meant that you weren't. And so I didn't feel like, even though I lived here and I know that I'm born in this country, did feel I was viewed as just 100% all American, if that makes sense. Even though everything about me is in this country, I'm not from another country, you know. Um, and later on, when politics became a factor, that, you know, in my late teens, getting ready to be a voting age, I realized what a big part capitalism plays in the American dream. And so, capitalism, in theory, well, capitalism 100% is, I think, what people uphold as an American ideal, even more than being a melting pot, even more than being able to experience other cultures. And so I do think that we have this, we hold capitalism to a very high regard. And I think the reason for that is the thinking is, okay, here's America. Everyone starts at the same exact level. You're given the same tools. This is the theory. We're all given the same tools. We go. If you're lucky to find things on the way, or if your family gives you something extra on the way, great. Whoever works the hardest gets rewarded the best, and then you can do anything you want. You need no organizations. You don't need anything else. You just have money, and you do what you want with the money. If you need a new tooth, you just figure out a way to buy a new tooth. If you need food, you get it. You have the money and you can do it. Money is power. And so I think that kind of thinking fits really well for in politics, period. But it definitely seems to resonate with me when I hear conservative politicians speaking, because when we talk about America, we talk about the bounty of America and people being able to benefit in this country. And when I hear conservatives and Republicans speak, it pretty much is from a business standpoint only. And then the next way is religion. But it's like business, it's like if there's 20 things on the list, it's business, 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 religion, religion, and then sick people. Like, oh, if you got cancer, we want to take care of you. You know, but for the most part, it's business. And so I want to acknowledge that. I'm not going to ask you all to comment too much on that, because there are certainly when we're only focused on business, I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat or how you identify, if your only incentive is business, then the choices are already made. The you know, the definition of in a corporate world, the definition of a successful corporation is one that makes more money next year than it did last year, right? And so in order to do that, you have to make your products at a cheaper price, and you have to you know, pay your employees. There's a limit on how much you can pay your employees. And so I think that's an important part. And we don't all have the same experience with business. I want everyone to speak about business the way that they want. But it's really difficult to argue about the the business only focused perspective. That seems to be very understandable, I think, to anybody, if you are a liberal or Democrat or Republican or independent. Understanding how the Republican Party is focused on business and making money for each individual, then it makes sense. The piece that doesn't seem to fit into the Republican Party, and I do think it's possible to be a successful business person and be a Democrat. That's obvious. I think that's true.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
but I think the piece that doesn't seem to fit for me and that I would try to understand is that there are certain, it seems like the best way to be a Republican and a Black person in this country, and this is my impression, is to be just a dedicated Republican and never acknowledge your Blackness. Then it seems to fit with the Republican model. Um, Not really addressing queerness in a way that celebrates identity. Let me back that up. It seems like with the Republican Party, the best way to, I can't even really think of a way
Can
to
I
fit
can I
queerness
interject?
and all these, hold on. I can't even really think of a way to fit queerness and all these identities into the Republican model. Both of you said that this, Paul, you said that you're sort of, a walking contradiction or oxymoron. So that those two, it says to me that there's not that much harmony out at some point with that identity, with this identity. And Chris, you mentioned that the Republican Party doesn't really talk about any of those things. It's pretty much the best who succeeds. That's it. And so I do think that as people, as the human race, I hope that we are able to get to a spot where we are not only focused just on money, that we do focus on the humanity. I think that people are made up of energy, and our identity should be celebrated. And I haven't seen that coming out of the Republican Party, as Paul just said, like being celebrated for any of those things. And so let's talk more about how some of those issues, like the business piece, we can argue about another day on what are the best business decisions that we can make. But the piece that doesn't seem to fit as well into the Republican platform are some of the identity pieces. Some people call that identity politics. And so I do want to ask, I kind of want to go down a little list of some of the things that I hear Democrats talking about that I don't hear Republicans talking about in the same way. Is that cool?
Of course.
I do. Yeah, go. Mhm.
Okay. And we have Blackness and queerness are on the list. And we will get back into queerness, but I just wanted to hear your quick take on it. Let's just jump into climate change as an economic and racial issue. And so what does climate change mean to you? Both, just jump in.
For me, honestly, this is one of the issues that I do agree with the Democrats with. That I'll give you guys.
Okay, but what does climate change mean to you? Can you explain it? I mean, I
Well,
appreciate
no,
you.
I do believe that climate change is happening. I do believe that Trump is definitely not doing enough for that. He's not acknowledging it much. Um, but yeah, I do. I know it's happening. New York is now a tropical island, and it was never that. So yeah.
Okay, Paul.
I'm going to keep it very simple, and I apologize. I don't have much to say about it other than I do take the stance on the Democratic Party on this, and that climate change is real. Even with all the information or facts that's out there, I've not done the extensive research, and for that, I can't comment.
Okay. Well, but we all believe. I guess it sounds like you're both saying that you do agree that climate change is real. And
Look at that. We have common ground.
I wasn't necessarily trying to put you on the spot and ask you whether or not you think it's real. I think at this point it's a given that it is real. You know, uh, I wanted to go a little bit deeper in and kind of
Maybe one of the other ones will be a little bit more.
no,
There's a list
that's
of
okay.
them.
There is a list of them. I want to acknowledge, though, with climate change and all of these issues that are on the Democratic talking points, that different people experience each of these issues differently, right? And some people, climate change may be more if you are a farmer or someone who lives in an area that the climate is drastically changing, or there's wildfires and things like that, or a tornado. I didn't even know that we had something in our country called Tornado Alley, which goes
I live
apparently
there.
right through Oklahoma. And honey, I would never. I'm sorry, I don't. If someone's like, "Where do you want to move? Would you like to move to Tornado Alley?" I don't know that I would say yes because it sounds dangerous. But that's a whole nother topic.
That's what the bunker
I
is
worked in
for.
Joplin, Missouri, where the F5 tornado happened. That was my hospital that actually got hit. I ended up moving to Tulsa because of the tornado.
Oh my God.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, I'm so happy that you made it out and that you are safe, and I hope that everyone you knew was. That sounds terrifying. And are you working in a new hospital now?
So I had done bedside nursing as a heart surgery nurse for about 9 years. Bedside nursing, which we can get into healthcare in a little bit, but bedside nursing broke me. So I took a step back, took months off, and I'm currently in a position where I work for a vascular clinic as one of the coordinators. So I work with vascular surgery, cardiology, help with patient referrals, surgery,
So you're still in
assignments. So
healthcare.
yeah,
Awesome.
still in healthcare.
Okay. Gorgeous. Well, I'm happy to see that you are still working, especially during this pandemic. So climate change is something that you both say that you agree with the Democrats on. I do want to note for for the viewers here that a lot of these environmental issues really, climate change is much more than just like the weather changing. It affects our environment, where we live around us, and there is information that people of color in certain areas are disproportionately affected by things like heat waves and wildfires and storms. And so that brings me to, the next topic. We're going to move on. Hey everyone, just a quick reminder that this week's Pep Talks, I have special guest Sasha Velour, and we're chatting about the movie Boomerang. We're moving this week's episode to Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern so that we can all put our full attention to the election. Once again, I hope you'll join me and Sasha here live on Twitch this Wednesday, the 4th at 7 p.m. Eastern. See you then. Intersectionality just in general. Like what does intersectionality mean to you?
I believe this is the first time, if we're being honest, this is the first time I've actually heard the term intersectionality.
Same. Okay. Intersectionality, I mean, it's literally speaking about the word intersections.
The intersections of the city?
Yeah, the intersections of a city, where two things cross and meet. So if Broadway is like, I mean, hate to be so New York centric, Paul. If Broadway is like a glitzy, glamorous street, but First Street, randomly, I'm not saying that it is. First Street is a street where those two things meet.
Repeat
right in the
that,
middle.
You cut out.
Is it okay? So Broadway is a really fancy, street that's, there's no crime on, and First Street is a street that has lots of crime. Where they meet at the intersection of those two things, what does it mean? Does it mean that area, that intersection is dangerous? Does it mean it's full of crime? Does it mean it's fancy? What's going on at that intersection? The fact that there's two different things that are very different are crossing each other and intersecting, then sometimes it creates a completely different outcome. Does that make sense? And so, for instance, being a a farmer, being a let's say I don't know what grows in heat. Being a peach farmer might mean one thing, but being a peach farmer who lives and farms in Antarctica, that's a whole different. Then it's like, what? How are you peach farming? So it means it's a whole different set of things.
So is it? So you're trying, like, you're comparing kind of like being gay and Republican is an intersectionality. Is that just so I know? Like, I'm trying to understand the concept. Yes. Kind of, no?
The concept of yeah, no, that is an intersection. To say all gay people, like, when we're speaking in broad terms and say gay people feel this, or gay people want this, or gay people do that, then we talk about the intersections. What do gay Republicans want? Maybe that's different than a gay Democrat. What
Yeah,
do black gay people want? Maybe that's different than a white gay person. What do women who are gay want? That might be different than men who are gay. And so
yeah.
you're right, those are intersections. That's what intersectionality is. And so that's like the really simple term of intersectionality.
I
And
think I
so,
can answer the question now.
okay, so what is intersectionality and what does it mean to you?
Well,
Now that,
growing up, yeah. Thank you, Miss Peppermint. Yeah, so I grew up in New York, in Queens, in Astoria, and I went to a public school. And I believe that I really did experience that intersectionality because I came from a very different background than a lot of the other kids did in the school. And I saw a
Mhm.
lot of things that I might have not seen if I went to St. Demetrius with all the other Greek kids because I didn't want to go there. Um,
Mhm.
so I saw a lot of things, and I feel like I really am intersectionality to the 10th degree because I feel like I've lived a lot of things. I've seen things happen. But
Mhm.
also I come from this other world where it's
Mhm.
kind of completely opposite, and it's so safe, and it's not. It's you don't see the same people, and everybody acts different. They speak different. And I do think that I guess in New York, it's beautiful. It's not like this in the rest of the country, but in New York, it's a beautiful thing because it really is a mix of everything here. And you're able to, everybody is almost in that category here. And I know that's not like that in the rest of the world. Um,
Okay.
or
Paul,
in the rest of the country.
Oh, I'm trying to. I don't want to take up.
I'm
I
not
know
putting
that you
you
have
on
a
the
lot of. I know
spot.
that you. Go ahead.
It's not really a topic, and so we can skip ahead. I just wanted
What I
to
was going to
to
say
kind
is
of
I don't want to
establish
waste
it.
your time when I'm not going to be able to articulate something, or it's going to take me a while when you have a lot, and I would just be stumbling over an answer that probably would never come, to be honest.
Okay.
So
So intersectionality is really kind of the what what I use when I'm making decisions. And another way to talk about intersectionality is two ways. The intersectionality is kind of more, basically a more scientific way to talk about diversity. Okay. And another way that I like to talk about intersectionality and the effect that it has on me is just more kind of empathy and compassion. And so that allows me, my intersectionality allows me to see the world, topics, issues, people through more than one lens. That's pretty much what intersectionality is to me. And so everything isn't always as it seems to be on surface level. Um, so here's one, what is LGBTQ equality and what does it mean to you specifically? I hope this is something that you all can answer.
absolutely,
I'll let you go first. Go.
I'm letting you go first.
Oh yeah. um, okay. I don't. I do identify as LGBT, and I'm gay, and I think it's a beautiful thing, but it isn't all of me. And I love who I am, and I love the people in this community, but it doesn't define me as a person. And I feel like this is the new normal. Being gay is supposed to be normal, and I feel like moving forward, being gay shouldn't be that, oh, I have to be a Democrat because I'm gay.
Mhm.
Because it
But wait,
shouldn't
Chris, hold
matter.
on. I think you're thinking ahead. I think you're thinking of our head. I just want to know what is LGBTQ equality and what does it mean to you? Not necessarily in terms of, what you have to say when people assume that you're a Democrat, but just like what
I
is
mean, LGBT
what is
equality is the same as just what, like freedom and the right to be able to be you. And I think we've come a really long way. We're not where we were 10 years ago or even
which
5
is
years
where
ago.
like what's when 10 years ago, if I mean you're a little, well, you're old enough. Okay. 10 years ago, LGBTQ equality might have, we weren't even, probably weren't even calling it LGBTQ equality. We were, might have been calling it LGBT equality. And even earlier than that, we were calling it gay equality. And so where have we come in your eyes?
I feel we're almost there. I feel we still need to keep fighting for a lot of
For
people in
things
our
like what?
community, for trans rights, for human rights, for gay rights, for everybody's rights, not just, I feel like LGBTQ is just going, it shouldn't, it's not going to stop. They keep adding things and words to it. And it
Right.
really shouldn't even be LGBTQ. It should just be civil rights. It's everybody's rights. We just all need to
Mhm.
have the same rights, regardless of if we're gay
Do
or
we,
anything.
you said we're almost there. Does that mean that we're not there?
Yeah,
Or
no, of course not. We're not there yet. But we're going to get there, and it's going to be
how?
normal.
Or what?
Uh,
Okay, so let's talk about how that means. I mean, everything's
Listen,
going to be all right. It is comforting to hear, but I want to go a little deeper than that.
look at the news. You see people out there fighting for their rights every single day, and they're not going to stop regardless of who is president. And if there is something that is wrong, because we are allowed to rally, whatever
Mhm.
side it falls on, you will hear about it. And the fight's never going to stop. It's part of the American dream. It's part of America. We have the right to protest. We have the right to go out
So
and do things.
what did you mean when you said you mentioned that we've achieved like we've come, I don't remember exactly what you said, but
We've come a long
we've come
way.
so far. So
We've come
what
a
does that
long
mean
way.
by we've come a long way?
That we have fought, that our forefathers fought for us, and we've come to this place that we are at now because of everybody that has fought for our rights since when. And
Okay.
it doesn't get negated moving forward. It only more will add to it because powerful voices are coming up every day. And you're here right now and you're speaking to a huge community of people that follow you, and you are a beautiful black queen of a presence that's just going to keep the fight moving
The
forward.
things you say. Oh yeah, I'm going to keep fighting no matter what. That's true. So what does LGBTQ equality mean to you, Paul? And in terms of what
Um,
we've achieved, what we need to achieve, why is there a thing called LGBTQ
so
equality?
what
If
have
we're
we
all
achieved as the
born equal,
LGBT?
yeah.
So first off, what is it to me? It is a community that comes from different races. It comes from different religions. It comes from different gender identities that all have the common. I don't want to say struggle, but I'll say struggle. The common denominator of not knowing or struggling with sexual orientation or identity, getting to a point where you're accepting of it, and then coming together as a community to educate. We
Mhm.
are now able to get married from. I'm going to talk about a religion a lot just because it's
Go
a
ahead. We know.
personal
We already
topic
know.
for me. But I feel, and I hope I get the chance to express this in a little bit. I do feel there is a softening in the church in regards to
Oh, the Pope just
LGBT
said
people.
in a via documentary that gay people should have the right, homosexuals have the right to be in family, and that he basically believes in civil unions. So
I'll probably
that's
talk about
significant.
I'll probably talk about the conversation that I had with the people in the church that ended up hurting me. So that said, we've made a lot of progression. I think where we go
Mhm.
forward is I think a lot of LGBT have issues with Donald Trump and the way that he presents himself in regards to some of the decisions he made in regards to trans rights, which let it be known that I denounce those things. Um,
Okay.
but I feel like whenever LGBT people talk about things against Trump, they forget that there's people that support Trump for There are people that support Trump that are good-hearted, good-natured, and if it's a vote for Trump, then obviously they hate them and they're oppressing them and they start attacking. And as a community, we need to figure out where we can speak in a manner where kindness can still be heard, and the people are going to hear the heart, not the heat.
You're doing a good job at speaking with kindness, though, Peppermint. So far, so good.
Thank
It's
you.
great.
I do want to, well, yeah, I hear that. Now, first of all, I agree with both of you 100% on everything you did say. When we talk about LGBTQ equality, I do think that one piece of this is it's not so much about who we are talking about. It's for me, it's also about who's not being talked about or who gets forgotten when we go to do things like give out money or earn money or have jobs or talk about a subject or acknowledge a something. Who's not mentioned is sometimes that speaks more, uh, than who is mentioned sometimes. And I understand that individuals are going to just keep writing. If you threaten someone's life, they're going to fight. I understand that, to your point, Chris. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting, Paul, that you mentioned is that we are connected by a certain struggle. And I do agree with you there. I certainly don't want to minimize the significance that the inner turmoil that gay people and queer people can face. But for me, the inner turmoil is really only sort of a symptom of the outward discrimination that is prevalent. I think it would be really. I don't think it would be disingenuous of us to sit here and say when we're talking about LGBT equality that there aren't efforts, like actual legal and direct efforts to remove rights, healthcare, and access from certain groups or the entire group of LGBT people in general. And these are things that have been perpetrated by both Democrats and Republicans. But I do want to speak specifically of one thing. Chris, you said that we're going to march in the streets. I've been really vocal and more politically active in the past few years than I ever have been. And the reason for that was, and well, let me back up. I started marching for marriage equality in a time when lots of other people were getting married. I wanted to have the right to get married. I did not have a partner. And I'm not even sure if I knew that marriage equality really applied to me yet as a trans woman. I didn't know how I fit into that story. I remember I was volunteering for a really well-known political LGBT group. And they were very active and vocal in the fight for marriage equality. And I used to raise money for them. I think I helped them raise over $250,000 at an event. And this was an event that, here's some intersectionality for you. I was invited to this $250,000 raising event. But as a Black trans woman who was out of work at the time and not getting paid from this organization, I actually had to do what you see in the movies, turn my couch cushions upside down to look for money to get enough money to get in the taxi to go down to that event, to not get paid, but use my energy to help them raise $250,000 so that they could get married. And that was really tough for me because that was tough. I think that's pretty clear. And so that's kind of like an intersection there. Like when I got to that event, I had to push through people picketing, trans people picketing. And I was like, why are these transgender people out here picketing? This was before I started my medical transition and come out as trans. And so I was inside helping this organization raise this money, and they were inside making jokes about all of the trans people used in the word, I won't say which, making fun of them. And I was really not sure what was going on. I was like, I thought this is the entire LGBTQ community. What's going on? This feels very, very separate. And then I looked around the room. It was a bunch of gay white guys, to be quite frank. There was a very big difference. It was not that diverse indoors. And then it sort of dawned on me how many different intersections there are in the LGBTQ community. And so it was not a surprise to me when the president of that organization, after marriage equality had been achieved, that the president of that organization said, you know what? We're done. We are good. The LGBTQ community has everything it needs. We got marriage equality. There's nothing else to worry about. Then it was so obvious to me that there's still problems happening, and that everyone's not really aware of those problems or looking at them. And so to me, LGBTQ equality is not just marriage equality. It's also, the murder rate now of 33 of trans women, mostly Black trans women, is really high this year. I mean, 33, it's the highest year on record. And these are just the ones that are on record. This is a problem. I haven't heard, actually, I have heard some of the politicians in this race acknowledge the murder rate of Black trans women. It wasn't Donald Trump. And when I think of, police brutality, not only as a Black person do I think about the issues with systemic racism in the police department. I also think of, as a Black trans woman, there's a lot of Black trans women, not myself included, because luckily I have a career path and a platform that saves me from having to be a sex worker or making the decision to be a sex worker. But I know that there's sex workers who have interactions with police, right? And so that means that policing is now a trans issue and is now an LGBT issue, if that makes sense. And so that's what I mean when I talk about intersectionality, and when I'm talking about LGBTQ equality. I don't necessarily hear, when I hear the Trump organization, or when I hear Tiffany Trump at the Trump Pride rally last week talk about Trump is great for LGBTs and the best you've ever had, I don't really hear anyone addressing any of those issues. And that's that's tough for me to understand. I know that, and the short end of it is, if you want to deal with LGBTQ issues, not just a gay guy becoming a millionaire, but LGBTQ issues across the board, some of the things that I mentioned, then you may have to put a rest on that if you're going to engage with the Republican Party, because I don't know that they're going to really be able to address Trump seeking to reverse healthcare protections for trans people earlier this year, or the ban on trans people from the military. I don't know if there's a satisfactory answer to that for LGBT people. I marched in 2019 to sort of support Title VII protections, workplace protections, which meant that anyone in the workplace couldn't fire somebody for being LGBTQ. That went up to the Supreme Court, and we all are protected at all of our jobs. It's illegal to fire someone for being LGBTQ in this country because of that. It was the Trump administration that was supporting removing those protections. And so,
Can I ask a question, Peppermint?
yeah, yes, please.
Okay, so I'm not able to speak on the intersectionalism, and I can't speak for your experience. Again, let it be known, I denounce any removal of trans protection or denial of trans rights. We deny that. We think that's wrong, and we hold Trump accountable for those actions. At the same time, I feel that a lot of the things that he eliminated were based on executive order. And in politics, executive order is only as good as the person in office. So it never actually became law. It was an executive thing that Obama wanted, and it was a temporary protection. It was a temporary protection, which is better than what Trump has done, better than what anything the Republicans had to offer. What do you think the conversation should have been whenever the Democrats and Republicans were talking, to where the Republicans didn't feel like their religious liberties were being stepped on, and the Democratic Party didn't feel like they were being thrown away? Like what is that intersection?
You mean before, when Obama was president? Is that what you're asking?
So, yeah, what should have been the conversations that happened in the Obama presidency to not make it an executive order, but actually put it into law for stronger protection for trans people?
I think it would have been, I think it should have been a conversation that was more nuanced and open. I don't know what the actual conversation was. Obviously, I wasn't there. But I
Well, no,
don't
but I think
necessarily.
these are the conversations that we should be having because
Right.
I feel like
Well,
it's
let me answer. I mean, I think I was very incensed. I got the notion just based on first of all, I think that there's a lot of conversations that happen behind closed doors from politicians that we will never be privy to.
for
And a lot of
sure.
those things a lot of the things that are attached to those social issues are things like, can you make sure that my state gets money for this or that my babysitter has money for that? And so like a lot of that stuff is loaded. I think that's what they're calling the fat on a lot of these bills and these things like that. I think that happens on both sides all the time. And so I don't know what was attached to one bill or another that would have been a problem. I do know that the announcement that that the Republicans made in the Senate that they were going to make sure that President Obama was a one-term president and that he would not be able to get anything done through Congress. They held that promise. They made that promise the day he was inaugurated, and they kept it. And so I don't know that he would have. I don't know that he would have if someone says to you, I'm going to make sure that nothing you do ever happens and I'm going to keep that promise, I don't know what the conversation is after that. If your only other option is an executive order and you're the president, guess, I mean, I would imagine that you would exercise that executive order. Let's just put it this way. I think Trump is in a similar situation. It's not the exact same thing because, well, it's clearly not the exact same thing because the Senate is Republican. But Trump has had a few executive orders, and he has more political support currently than Obama did at that point in time. And so I was really worried that marriage equality, we had no chance of marriage equality. We had no chance of trans people in the military because Congress had already said, you are never getting this through, period. And so I think that in order for the conversation to have been more nuanced and for the president then to not have had to make an executive order, I think it should have been a real conversation that worked the way that our government is designed on the front end to work, where there isn't an executive order and that does go through Congress and both sides support it, but it doesn't. I don't think we started in that situation. So I'm not sure that. I think without that executive order, there would be no marriage equality. Without that executive order, there would be no trans people having had been in the military, period. Because I don't think that the Republicans were about to turn around and be like, you know what, we want to do marriage equality. We have already admitted on this call that these issues do not fit into the Republican platform at large. Yes, there are gay people who vote for Trump. Yes, there are Black people who vote for Trump. Yes, there is a millionaire sitting somewhere who is gay. But in general, and he probably has the best health care in the world, but in general, the Republican Party is not that outspoken on being able to address many of these issues. And so I want to move on a little bit. Obama did, by the way, have the Obama administration had a Republican supermajority in Congress. That's basically what it was. I didn't even know what a supermajority was until I heard it the first time. Can we scroll up a little bit, please, Rafe? I'm ready to go on to the next thing. It seems as though, with regards to LGBT equality, and when we talk about LGBT equality, it means a whole lot, but it seems as though those issues don't necessarily fit into what they are presenting right now. And so if LGBTQ equality is your primary focus, then you might be on your own. Is that fair to say?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. I don't think if you'd be on your own today, you'd be on your own maybe 5 years ago. But today, there's Republicans that are coming
There
around.
are log cabin Republicans.
Mm-hmm. And that
That's actually that's a real.
yeah.
I know you know who the log cabin Republicans are.
Yes, I do.
I wonder. I passed other than marriage equality.
You cut out. I didn't hear you.
I wonder if the log cabin Republicans are working to get legislation passed that is pro LGBTQ, and I wonder if it is if it recognizes the whole spectrum of LGBTQ people, not just gay white men. That would be something that's something to look into.
Well, currently
And
I'm working with a group called the Republican Patriots here in Queens.
mhm.
Um, and I took some time before starting to work with them, and I had them come over here to the studio on a story in the story on Steinway, and we all sat in my conference room and we talked. And I really, before I got involved, I wanted to know that they really did want, like they were accepting me for me, and they were willing to fight for me and with me,
What
and
does that
also
mean?
we agree. Well, I wanted them to know. Well, before I got involved, I sat them down and I told them, "This is who I am. I'm gay, um, and I'm a business owner, and I'm also a family person, and I believe that I have my rights, um, but we're not there
Assuming
yet. But
that
I
they're
also
okay with assuming that they're okay with business owners and families, then the only thing that they would potentially have a problem with is you being gay, right?
Yes, but nobody had that problem. And
Uh-huh.
everybody, I was accepted with open arms. They love me. They
Uh-huh.
treat me like one of their own. Like I don't feel any bias from anyone in that group. And there's like over 50 people in that group. There's no bias
And so
whatsoever.
how
I
is
really,
your
but listen,
LGBTQ?
we are in New York. It's
Uh-huh.
different everywhere. I'm not saying that that's everybody's experience, and I'm not saying that we're there yet. And when I brought up gay issues, um, uh, Mr. Kincannon told me that he used to work in the 114, and he saw some real. And he actually told me the first time he met um, a trans woman, actually several trans women, because they would go into LIC, and they would pick up the girls that were, pulling tricks. And he said that he saw a lot of crazy things and he felt horrible for them. And we actually spoke about your community specifically,
And what
and
did
we
you say
really
about the
we bonded.
community? How
I
so?
told him I worked with Peppermint, and I told him that you're
Mhm.
trans, and that's how it started. That's how he told me. We
So
went
he
into that
basically said
story.
he's seen some trans prostitutes, and some
Well,
wild
no,
time.
no. We said how crazy, how bad it was, and how
Mhm.
far that we've come from there, because it is very different, the environment that he was witnessing in the 80s to what the
Okay.
environment is now.
So when you
And
say that you bring up gay issues, I don't mean to step on you, but I want to try to finish this conversation before we get cut off for time because we will get cut off for time. When
yes,
you say in this group that you bring up gay issues, what does that mean? When y'all are having a meeting and you're making a decision to do what, and you bring up gay issues, what do they say? What does that mean? How does that are they like, yes, let's deal with the gay issues? How does that go all the way through? I get that they like you, that they think you're cool, and that
yes.
they are
Well,
loving and
listen,
accepting of
right now
you.
we're not
But what does gay
we are
issues
not
mean?
trying right now. The main thing on the chopping block is not anybody's it anybody's rights right now. It's really just moving forward and trying to organize for this election right now. And it's no secret that for the most part, that community is not going to go out and vote for Donald Trump. That's just the that is
Okay.
what the reality is.
Okay.
And right now we aren't working on anything specifically, but
Hmm.
they know that my
They know you're
ideal
gay
is
and they
down.
support you.
No, they know that I'm gay. They know they support me, and they also know that later down the line, there will come a time where there's something that we are going to have to fight for, and it's going to be for one of my issues. But right
Okay.
now, we're working on something else. I told you, I
Okay.
just started working with them within the
Yeah,
past
that's
like
fair.
60
Well,
days.
what do you think the first issue will be that you're going to ask them when you do get the time or the chance?
Right now, I'm really I don't want to say
Okay.
something that that because I'm not sure. I don't know what the issue
Okay.
will be, but I did tell
Mm.
them because it is a talking point of myself that I would like to implement that within our group and speak about issues.
Okay.
Because I wanted to
Fair.
hear what they
Okay,
would
well, I
say.
hope that, yeah, I mean, that's the first thing I certainly remember. I mean, it's kind of like you're coming out to a new group.
Yeah,
I imagine if they didn't know. And so
yeah,
that's important. I'm glad that they were accepting, you know.
yeah.
And if it's an environment that is supportive of you, then that's the environment. Then you should be in those types of environments for sure. I want to move on to just tell me what your thought is, what this means to you. What is systemic racism? The definition of it. Paul, you're first.
What is systemic racism?
Mm-hmm.
The acknowledgement that people of certain minorities have had a far greater struggle than the average white male. Somebody that doesn't, somebody that's not known what it's like to be LGBTQ, what it's like to be African American or Latin or any ethnic minority.
Okay.
I don't. This is.
So,
This is a hard question for me to answer, and I know that I feel like
I'm just
I
asking
should
for
be.
the if you have a definition for it. And if you don't, that's okay. It's totally
It's
fine.
the
I can define it. I'm just want to know like what your connection is to the word systemic racism.
that racism exists, and that I, as a white gay male, have to acknowledge my privilege. That there are people that are not my skin tone, not my gender, not in my socioeconomic status, that have had it far worse than I have, and I cannot compare their story to mine in terms of where I'm at and say, well, they're not there because they did the exact same things.
Okay. And so systemic racism, Chris, what does it mean to you? Like if someone says systemic racism to you, what does it mean? Is
isn't
there a
it when like you're just like and I could be wrong. Isn't it when you're just racist to like a bunch of people? That's what I would think.
okay. I have a definition. I can explain it, but
Thank you.
what is race when and I've heard both sides, but I heard Vice President Pence the other day say that America is not systemically racist. What does that mean to you when you say that? When you hear that?
I think that I understand that there's issues, and I understand that there is some. You know what? Because this is a new def. I don't want to speak
Mm-hmm.
in a
Can I?
way. Yes.
I'm going to say that there needs to be an acknowledgement that racism exists. Racism happens. People are discriminated against. To lump that all together and generalize and say American or America as a whole is racist, I don't know if I can agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to acknowledge the racist
What's the
actions
difference?
that happen. What?
What's the difference to you?
The difference between America having racist moments and America being racist.
Hmm? Can you
I feel
just
like
give me
it's just I feel like it's just a
if there's
blanket
a
statement.
difference? Can uh-huh.
I feel like
America
it's just
being
it's a
racist is
blanket
a blanket statement.
statement to not try to have a. I feel like it's almost a shut down topic. Like if you say America is racist, it eliminates the conversation of, well, these were racist moments, and having a Republican say, yes, this was an absolute terrible thing that happened. This shouldn't have happened. We denounce what happened to George Floyd. We denounce what happened to Breonna. We want justice for both of those things. We want justice for their families. We want that. Those two actions or the dozens of others does not mean that America, all 50 states, all the people in this country are racist.
Okay. So here's the definition. Institutional racism, also known as systemic racism, is a form of racism that is embedded as normal practice within society or an organization. So it can be in a business, it can be in the laws, it can be in the practices and the customs. Never mind, Rafe, you can get rid of the clipboard. It can lead to such issues as discrimination in criminal justice, employment, housing, healthcare, political power, and education, among other issues. And so the best way for me, because I had this conversation with a girlfriend who's also a Trump supporter, who is trans, and so we have similar experiences. She's a trans woman, and she happens to be a sex worker and an adult performer on video. Just like me. Just kidding. I'm not. I don't. Anyway, the point is, she mentioned as a trans woman that she has faced discrimination as a trans woman in the world of adult films. That I guess that women and trans women and women get paid at a different rate. They get paid a different amount than men, just like across the board. That some of the practices are geared more towards men than they are women, and vice versa. There's some other things that are geared more towards women than men. And as a trans woman, there is even a difference there between cis women and trans women. For instance, one thing that I know, she didn't say this, but one thing that I know is that if a male performer, and I hate to get porn, but this is just, if a male performer works with a trans woman, then that puts him in the gay category, and he's kind of no longer eligible to work with cis female performers, cis meaning non-trans women performers, and so that's obviously a way that trans women are treated different. Like, that's very clear, right? And so I asked her if she thought systemic racism existed and what she thought it was, and she immediately went to racist, the word ending with a T, racist. And I think that's a word that we've heard a lot, racist, ending with the T. I usually don't speak about race ending with a T now. I usually end it with the letter M, racism. Racist and racism are two different things. Racist are actions and practices that are limited to one individual. Racism is wider spread. It is speaking of a larger system, kind of like the definition that I just read. And so I think of an easy way to clarify that is think of sexism and sexist. If a man, let's just say some man, is a chauvinist and says something mean to his wife, or let's say he's a boss and decides to pay a woman less money in his job, is he a chauvinist or sexist? Yes, by definition, that would. If he loses his job or we take him out of the equation, we don't kill him, but we just move him out of his job. Does that get rid of sexism? Does that mean that another boss in another country won't pay a woman less money? No, the issue still exists. And it's not like those two bosses called each other and said, are you going to pay her less? I'm going to pay her less. They've never even met each other. It's already ingrained. The reason why that boss, who's never met the other boss, decides to pay the woman less, it's not because he's just a bad person. He's not a bad apple necessarily. It's the system that allows him to make that decision without being challenged. And so let's take that thinking and put it over to racism. When we talk about racist people, it's really easy to talk about race in a way that, that person made a bad decision. And then it really isolates it down to the individual choices of one person. But when we talk about racism, there really is a system that allows people to, in our country, discriminate without being checked, to not take into consideration the needs of people of color when they are creating their products, making their commercials, making hiring decisions. there in the past 20, 30 years, there have been some things put into place that kind of work against that. Even though our Constitution says all people, all men are created equal, Black folks, when they were no longer slaves, were given the right to vote, even though that didn't really happen until the 1960s, right? And so, I mean, they were given the right to vote in the 1800s. Nearly 100 years later, they
But I do
actually,
want to say that they were freed by a Republican president.
yes, they were. And the Democrats were basically, I mean, the parties switched. We already know that. Saying, that Abe Lincoln was a Republican and then so was Martin Luther King doesn't really win that many points because on the other end, the people who are the Democrats were basically doing all the same things as Republicans. The parties switched. That's the truth. But yes, it is very lovely that Abe Lincoln was registered as a Republican. But so that's what systemic racism is. It is to take people of color into consideration, and that the system, as is the employment system, the justice system, the healthcare system, work differently for white people in this context than it does for people of color. And
Yes.
and I think when you look at it that way, it's very difficult to deny that this country, the United States of America, has a particular relationship to systemic racism. When we talk about, just like when we talk about those two bosses that don't want to pay the woman the same amount, but they're in two different countries, the same thing happens. You can be in two different states and be a Black person treated a particular way, right? And this is not a coincidence that Black people have had a particular experience in this country. The reason why more than one Black person or more than one person of color has had a similar experience, even though they've never met, they're not related, and they don't even live in the same state, is because every single state in this country has a particular relationship to racism. And I like to say every single state has a particular relationship to racism, and this country has a relationship to racism, so that we can get past the blanket statement and at least acknowledge what I think is true. There's a history of racism in this country that has worked its way into the laws. If the people who were making the laws and the rules were racist, if they as individuals were racist people when they were making the laws, then it's almost like, it's impossible for the laws that they were making to not reflect that. I've heard racism talked about in this country like we baked a cake. And they baked the cake a long time ago, and they put all the ingredients in, and they got this big old heaping cup of got the flour, got the sugar, heaping cup, and they poured the sugar in and baked that cake. And then they looked and realized that it wasn't sugar, it was salt, right? And it's baked in. And now what we want to do is sweeten the cake, but you can't sweeten a cake that was baked with salt. You have to start all over again. And so that means that we need to look at how the systems go, how the systems work, not just the actions of that person that was in the boss that day, but how the entire system was set up and has been working in the tradition. And so that's what systemic racism is to me. Can you see how the country has a relationship to racism in a particular way now that I've explained it that way?
I think that our country goes in phases, and systemic racism towards Black and African American individuals, I agree, has been going on since forever. There's also, whenever there's a new kind of round of immigrants that come in from whatever country they're coming in from, there is systemic racism towards them because they're seen as coming in and taking our jobs. I get that as well. I understand the things that people of color have gone through in the past in this country. But the same thing as the LGBT issues that we spoke about before, I do believe that we're coming forward. And I do believe that, I do believe that, like you said, to restructure and rebuild and take these old institutions like the NYPD or any PD, any police
It's
department.
not just New York, yeah.
It's just New York. It's not just New York. I think things like that, if we need to do things like that, which I do agree we need to do, they are going to cost a lot of money to do the infrastructure of a police department for a whole state from the bottom up, and then retrain all their officers and figure out how things are going to run now. We can't be defunding them $1 billion. We need to be adding $1 billion to properly do that kind of
Do you,
restructure.
when we talk about the police, I agree. I do think that I think the defunding the police slogan has gotten a bad. It's the quick version, and people only have time for the quick version these days. But really, it's about divesting, which is the opposite of investing in. And I think when we look at the many police departments, and I'm going to be very real, like when we've seen specifically like video after video, story after story, historically, since let me just start. And God, I have so much to say, and I don't mean to be over talking, but I want you to understand this point when it comes to the police. And I don't mean to bring out facts and figures, Paul, but just listen. Historically, and everybody can do their own research on this. Historically, there wasn't really a police department, the NYPD, the LAPD, that didn't exist 300 or 400 years ago, right? The way that it does today. These police departments didn't really come into existence.
America didn't exist 300-400 years ago.
Right. These police departments.
That. Just say 200. Just say 200.
Well, no. I mean, I'm sorry, on this land 300 or 400 years ago, when the beginning of this country was started being built by the slaves that were here 400 years ago. We didn't have police departments existing in the way that they do today. These police departments were put into place pretty much around basically the day, maybe I won't say the day, but the same time that the slaves were freed. And they were known as slave patrols. The purpose of the slave patrols was to protect the property of the people who were not slaves, the white people who formerly owned slaves. The slave patrol was not only to protect that property, but they were also to go out and find Black people who they thought were breaking the law and then hold them accountable. The laws for Black people were different than the laws for white people. That's obvious. That is on record. And I'm not talking about drinking from the same fountain. I'm talking about walking down the street and existing on one side of the street or the other. You're not allowed to walk here without your papers. You can't. Everything, almost anything that you can do was criminalized in terms of Blackness, and they put Black people back into the jail and back into a sort of slavery where they were back in the fields. That's a different conversation. The history of the police department in our country started there, right? And so the police department, like I said, hold on one second.
But I do want to say,
hold on.
though.
The police department, wait, hold on. Let me finish. The police department, like I said, this country has a particular relationship to racism that I don't think has been completely ironed out. And that's a history. But when we talk about fixing things and restructuring things, I don't know that the police department can really govern itself, because generally what we've all heard of a blue wall of silence and internal investigations with police departments where, a lot of times really nothing happens, or it's kept silent, or the video is missing, or the body cam wasn't on. We hear a lot about these things and not really being able to, we can't really measure it. And so I don't mean to harp on policing, but it is an issue when we talk about this country, and you said law and order and systemic racism. And And so I think that's something really important to acknowledge and think about when we talk about defunding the police. It really is about diverting funds that are currently sitting with the police that are not governing themselves, that we keep getting these new issues coming out, new brutality, new people dying in their custody, diverting that over. And so that when someone who's has a mental illness, or someone who has a particular problem with substance abuse is 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 experiencing difficulty, that the police aren't who is called, that a professional, a medical professional, is who is called. And that is, I think that's really the main driving force behind defund the police. It's not we want criminals running around and we don't want there to be police to do anything about it. It's we don't want the police to shoot that person who's having withdrawal from a drug. Do you know what I mean? That's really what it's about.
So what happens so not investing, divesting. So the police department loses the money. In turn, the police lose money or part of the salaries, right? Because part of divesting is their money has to be taken away at some point. I feel, in my opinion, we can say that we don't want criminals running around, but to believe that morale among police and all these safety workers that have been hired to protect the American public, the good police that are honestly doing the right thing, to say that they're going to keep this good morale and be like, well, our money's being taken away, but I'm still going to do this for the common good. I don't see that being a reality. And I feel like there will be
when anybody loses money, they don't feel it doesn't feel good.
That increases the risk of crime. That increases the risk of crime and violence against all people, all races.
I think, I guess one of the things that might be a good idea to do is take a look at why crime exists. Does crime exist just for the purpose of having people correct it? Or does crime exist because of another need? And then the next question is, are people just born as criminals? And this is like, what's that Tom Cruise movie where they were sticking things in people's brain? Oh, what was the name of it? I can't remember. But the question is, and I think a lot of people do believe that people are just born to be criminals. I've heard certain type of speaking that supports that, Black people are just naturally criminals. And I've heard that. I know I'm not the only person who's heard it, whether y'all want to admit it or not.
I've heard it.
So the question is, what causes someone to be a criminal, right? Why are they a criminal? Is it just because they want to go around and hurt people? Or is it that they are in a particular situation? I think most of the times, and I don't know most criminals, I would argue that most of the time a person commits a crime usually a direct reflection of their circumstances that they're in. There are exceptions to every rule.
Absolutely.
But I think it has a lot to do with what they're dealing with in that moment. And some things like that, a police officer cannot solve. A police officer can only regulate someone's actions. They can't regulate people's decisions, right? And so when we talk about people being in a situation, we have a country that here we are, people are in a particular situation. They're in a situation with finding themselves without money, without access to healthcare, without access to food, without access to whatever they don't have access to, right? Housing. Then they're making these decisions to commit crimes. And so I think when we talk about how to really solve this and how to stem crime, it's not, well, we're going to have these criminals anyway, so let's keep the criminals and then the police officers will do something different. It's not about that. I think it's about, let's take the money and put it in a situation where you have less criminals. If you don't have criminals, or if you don't have people committing these crimes, then you don't need a bunch of cops running around with tanks and military. In 2019, fiscal 2019, 13,712 claims and lawsuits against the New York City Police Department were resolved by $975 million. And these are clearly,
I don't want to, and I understand what you're saying, and you are very passionate about this particular issue, and I know I know I don't want to take away from your community's past, because I can't relate to that, and I've never had that experience with any police officer that I'm sure you've had. But I do want to say that the thing, like, what needs to happen, you said divesting. What the movement should be focused on is investing. I don't think what we can't be taking away from a situation, because that's not what's happening. Even if people are out there, they're fighting, and they're fighting for the right reasons, but then things are happening completely wrong. What needs to happen is federal investment into the inner cities, into social services, on top of whatever money the NYPD gets. And they should be funding the NYPD more to restructure and re-educate and do things.
Well,
But
wait, hold on. We already know, and we can agree that when the NYPD or any other police department gets money now, they buy what? Tanks and guns. And so that's one thing that we're understanding. There hasn't been a it doesn't appear that there's been an overall, and I'm not a police officer, but it doesn't appear as though there's been an address, a really concerted effort to address some of these things that we talked about. And I mean, look, police officers should, are you saying we train police officers to become medical professionals?
No,
I think
I'm
a medical
saying that we
professional
have
is the
medical
one who should be
professionals
called.
and police officers. What I'm
Mhm.
saying is that you don't, the solution is not getting rid of someone, it's adding someone. The solution
Mhm.
is more, not less. Um, you
Mhm.
can't put a blanket statement for every police district. Everyone is different.
Mhm.
There needs to be
Oh,
some sort of. Oh,
so
hold
can
on,
I
you go.
say this? So
Yes,
in
yes,
regards to,
please,
I'm
please.
going to sum it up a little bit for you, Peppermint. In investing, do you think, whenever I talk about investment, I like the idea of more police involvement in communities, but not from a place of political force, like actually having people walk the neighborhoods, walk the blocks, actually interacting with the patient.
No,
I almost said patients.
they
They're
don't
stuck.
need that. What they need is they need social service workers. They need people to come in and educate the community. They need programs in the inner cities that are going to provide a sense of like more education. And there's a lot of issues that are going on within the inner cities that need more education, more social service, more money in certain neighborhoods. And Trump did
Clean
open
water
up.
if you're in Flint, Michigan.
Yes. And I will say that Trump did start black business owned zones where black business owners can get
Mhm.
federal funding to open up their businesses. And this is part of the things that Trump would do for the black community. I'm not saying that he's a good
It's pretty
option.
much the
I'm not
only thing that
saying that.
he has in his plan. Um,
No,
and
there is also prison reform. He's created a program for prisoners to come out of prison and be rejoined into the to
Acclimated.
civilized acclimated. Thank you
acclimated.
so much. There's a lot of things that he's done, and I'm not saying that it's because he really identifies with your community. It might be to offset something, but he has done things.
He
And I
He's
also
do
he's
has an
think.
approval
proposed
rating
these things. They
among
haven't necessarily been
African American
implemented
voters.
yet.
He's above 20%.
Right. So this is the thing that's really interesting is that, when we talk about Trump and his relationship with the Black community, he doesn't necessarily have the best track record in terms of his history. The policies that he's talking about now during this voting year are, I think, they came and would be very clear. He was the last one to the conversation when we started talking about systemic racism and racism in 2020. Racism became it moved because of George Floyd murder. Racism moved up into a very high position of conversation during 2020, to which Trump really wasn't talking about or responding in a way that I think was compassionate or acknowledging what everyone else was acknowledging. what folks in the Black community are acknowledging. Since then, in the past 2 months, he has released his Platinum Plus plan, I think it's called, for the Black community that addresses Black business owners and prison reform. And he has also touted very much money to HBCUs, extending or eliminating the need for them to have to renew applying for more money, which he has implemented. He didn't stop that. I want to credit him, but also acknowledge that that plan was put into place under Obama, but he just carried it out. That's very good. But when we talk about, I don't know that that is the fix, to the relationship that this country has with systemic racism. I don't know if that is the fix. I do think that there are more things that could be said and done, and I do think that if President Trump would be more compassionate, then he might see and acknowledge some of those things, or maybe even come up with some of those things that are necessary. I don't know that he has done that, and his history doesn't necessarily support those things. When we talk about, for instance, the exonerated five, who were formerly known as the Central Park Five, the five young Black boys who in New York City were arrested and sent to jail for most of their lives, and later on exonerated for the rape and murder of a young white woman in Central Park. Donald Trump was very much like, send him, they get the death penalty right away. That was a different day and age. He's much older than he is now, and he's president now. But I wonder, he's never actually acknowledged that a change of position. And I'm not expecting you to answer for that, but I'm just saying it's really difficult to see across the board that, he will be the first one to tell you that he said it the other day, he's the least racist person in the room, even though there was a Black woman sitting right in front of him, and that he has been the best president for Black people since Abraham Lincoln. So with those two things, do you think that he's onto something? Do you think that he is the best president for Black people since Abraham Lincoln? Like, it's just him and Abraham Lincoln, and that's it?
I don't think he's been the best president for the African American community.
Well, he says he's done the most for Black people of any president in history, with the exception of Abraham Lincoln. Those are his words, to make it more clear.
Even with the exception of Abraham Lincoln, I don't know if he's the absolute best, but I think to call him a racist when he's also created numerous jobs for people of color that have not had, that struggle with finding jobs in an Obama recession, that they weren't there. He created all of these jobs. So for that, I think he's done a lot for the Black community. But I can only speak for the unemployment rate. I can't speak for everything else.
I will add, and in his defense, I guess, he did grow up in New York, in Queens, and I know coming up in New York, at least for the people that I know, it's a little more liberal. People. I really don't believe he's a racist. I don't believe he practices. I believe that if he comes off that way, it's because
he does come off that way, Chris.
If he comes off that way, I believe it's because he is trying to create a safer America where he's not saying don't come to America or don't try to come into America, just come in legally. The way that he says that, sometimes I get it. The rhetoric is not presidential.
So do you think there's a connection between the rise in hate crimes and Donald Trump being in the presidency?
I believe that correlation is not as much to do with Donald Trump as it is with how the media plays the drama out. I think that has more to do with that than our actual president.
So, okay, go ahead. Sorry, Paul.
And it's from the media, and I think it's from a media that's recently proven that it's not necessarily the most reliable. I feel like this is probably going to be the most controversial thing that I say whenever we talk facts and figures and everything. Whenever people receive facts, it is somebody that is giving you new information. And when we're receiving this information, it's a blind trust that the person with the credentials that we don't have, they're more educated, that they're going to give it to us in a pragmatic manner. The truth of the matter is that people with the higher information, the higher credentials, they can take what is, sort it, and give it back to you, or because they have more knowledge of a subject, they can rearrange the facts or the figures to their liking and create a narrative and put it back there. But because they are more knowledgeable on the topic, it's okay. Look what happened whenever we.
So, do you think that the race? Let's talk about him being people accusing him of being a racist president, or his relationship to racism. Do you think that he has done anything to help that, or what has he done, in your opinion, to support or refute that?
Other than the job unemployment thing, I really can't speak to that. But I also see the majority of Black people. Yes, he has one of the higher percentages among Black Republicans. That doesn't mean that the majority of Black people vote for him. So he's a bull in a china shop, and he likes to pick fights. I don't know if he's actively reaching out to a community that the majority of them are saying "fuck you." Sorry, I have to edit that part out.
Okay, we'll
figure it out. Saying you're a racist, you're this, and for years and years trying to mar him and mangle his name and make him fail as a president.
I can understand that. I think that there certainly is vitriol coming from people, but he didn't start off as innocent. When we're talking about his relationship to racism, right? He did take out an ad, a full page ad, I think more than once, really championing and trying to politic for the murder of these innocent men who were in jail, right? And they weren't men; they were teenage boys, by the way. I'm speaking about the Central Park Five. He also has a history in his businesses to not renting to Black tenants or potential people that were looking for housing. And so he does have a relationship to racism that he hasn't necessarily, I don't believe that he has personally expressed anything that pulls him away from that relationship to racism.
But then follow-up
especially
question. Let's say that he does. Let's say that he does say, I absolutely apologize for this. Do you think the Black community will say, thank you for saying that, or do you think they'll say, no, I don't believe you?
I think all humans want to be acknowledged in some way, shape, or form, and I think that is a part of it. I think that's important to do. I do think that his Platinum Plus plan is a good idea on face value. I haven't read all the details of it, but I do think that folks in the Black community would respond favorably if he acknowledged them in a way that was more than just now. Do I think all Black people are going to go out and say he's not I don't know what their reaction would be, and I don't know necessarily I don't know what it would take. I do think that what we're talking about today in 2020 it's not enough for someone to say I'm not racist, right? That's the conversation that you probably have heard on the ground. And when it comes to the activism piece, the conversation has turned to being anti-racist, right? So someone who's not a racist will probably just not say anything if they see racism happening, right? They'll just be like, well, I'm not, that's not me. An anti-racist obviously will go and seek out racism to dismantle it and deal with it actively. That's the difference, right? There's a difference between those two perspectives. You can understand that, right? You agree? Yes? No? Okay.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think when we are holding other people, there is a certain level of accountability happening in 2020 with regards to the conversation of race. That's true. After George Floyd, a lot has changed, and people are talking about race in a different way than they were years ago. And so I don't know that Donald Trump has done a lot to help that. And plus, he hasn't come out and said those things, right, Paul? And so, you know, he's told us that he has been the best for us, so he hasn't acknowledged any of those things in his past. And I think that's a sign that's of someone who doesn't think that they have anything to apologize for and doesn't have anything that they have to acknowledge, that he's already been the best.
But also,
And so
you have the
to me,
majority
that's
of America.
disappointing.
You have the majority of America that's looking for Trump to fail. I don't see him being an outspoken person apologizing of anything when he already feels the rhetoric is coming back at him full force as well. I would not want his position to try to be leading the country when everybody is against me, or it feels like everybody's throwing all this rhetoric, they're throwing hateful remarks, all of these things. Whenever we get back to the facts, because the facts portion is a very important thing. For 3 years, we've had these facts that Russia happened, that there was a collusion. And we took these facts and we said that because of this and because of that, Donald, you're a racist. That story came
I don't
crashing
think
down.
it has to do with I don't think Russia disproves Donald Trump's relationship to racism.
It does disprove the fact that we can no longer take a fact and be like, oh, that is what it is. A fact right now is only as good as the person that's giving it to you, because it's
right.
absolutely.
And I think that same thing can be said for Donald Trump. I mean, there's a
To
lot
speak-
of things
to
that he
speak
says
for
out of his mouth
I don't
that
disagree
are
with that, yeah.
absolutely category untrue.
To speak for his integrity, though, to have him apologize for something that I don't think, because I don't think that he thinks
should
that.
apologize. We already know.
So I
he
don't
doesn't.
want, and he doesn't. And for his integrity, if he truly believes that he doesn't have to apologize because he thinks he didn't do something wrong, an apology would just be disingenuous and would only look bad from him.
I'm not looking. I do not believe that Donald Trump will be apologizing for any of the things that he did that were actually that aligned him with racism in a way that is inseparable. I don't think that he will be separating himself from that any more than I think that David Duke, who was the leader of the Ku Klux Klan, will be apologizing for any of the things that he did back in the day. I don't think that there has been much of a change. And so he has no reason to apologize.
I will say that hold on, let me just word this. I think that he doesn't believe that he is racist, which if he doesn't believe that he is racist, then
we know that he doesn't.
I know. Let me finish my thought. I'm sorry. And hold on, just give me a second. Nobody speak, because
I'll take a water break.
Just how he hasn't had your experiences, and he hasn't been able to experience what it's like to be an African American.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't expect him to understand. And
I think there's a lot of, Chris, let me just say, there's a lot of people who have never been African American who do not have the same relationship to racism that Donald Trump actually has, and who are actively working towards on being anti-racist, which means that whenever they see other people around them doing or saying or engaging in racist behavior or things that support racism, that they work against it. They speak out against it. And so you're right. Donald Trump doesn't believe he's a racist. That's fine. He may or may not be a racist, but he definitely has said and done things that align him with racism in a way that is inseparable unless he works to get himself out of it. And we can all agree that he's not going to work to get himself out of those things. He's quite happy being aligned with racism in the way that he is. He is aligned with racism. He has a relationship to racism. He does. It's a fact. His actions have spoken that. Will he do anything about that? I don't know. I
believe, honestly, and going back to your systematic racism that you were speaking of, I believe that we all as Americans have a relationship to it. And I believe that it is an underlying part of our society. And I think that but I don't think that he is actively trying to be racist, or I don't think he is.
You're right. There's a difference between actively trying to and
be
being
racist.
okay with it.
And I see him, and I see that like he's not like I see like my father in him, and I see other people in him that I know, and I don't think he means
Can I
harm by
ask
it.
you? Let me ask you because we have to move on to the next. Hey everyone, just a quick reminder that this week's Pep Talks, I have special guest Sasha Velour, and we're chatting about the movie Boomerang. We're moving this week's episode to Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern so that we can all put our full attention to the election. Once again, I hope you'll join me and Sasha here live on Twitch this Wednesday, the 4th at 7 p.m. Eastern. See you then. What is political voter disenfranchisement and what does it mean to you? If you don't know, just tell me. And these are like 2-word
I'm
answers.
out.
I'm sorry. Go.
No,
Okay.
I'm out on this one.
Okay, great. Paul,
I'm
so
out on this one.
you are
Yeah.
out. You said so. Disenfranchisement. I think the definition, and somebody can look this up, but the definition of disenfranchisement means you know how people are a part of a thing, whether it's a political party or a group or a family. To be disenfranchised means to be taken out of that group, to be removed. So if your family disowns you, that's a form of disenfranchisement, okay? They are removing you and blocking you from the access to what it means to be a part of that family. So voter disenfranchisement is basically actions that are taken by the larger body to remove smaller individuals or groups from the larger body. So in this example, voter disenfranchisement is people being voter ID laws, voter registration, various voter registration, things like closing down polling sites so that people can't vote. If there was 100 polling sites in 100 cities, now there's just like one polling site in 3 cities in the same state, things like that. I don't know that number factually, but I'm just saying things like that. Closing down polling sites, making it, adding more questions or asking for more information on forms and papers that make it more difficult for people to do things like register to vote. In this country, becoming a voter and actually voting is more difficult now than it was years ago, right? And so that's what voter disenfranchisement is. That along with a practice called packing and cracking, which I just learned about, which is basically like redistricting the voting so that groups of people who vote, their vote can be split or condensed to have a different impact on the electoral college, right? I'm no voting scholar, but that's basically how I understand it. Are we on the same page with that? Like, do you understand what I'm saying?
Are you saying that is going on currently?
Oh yes, that is definitely going on currently. It's definitely a fact. You can look it up. It's going on currently.
At this point of the filming of this show, there's been about 60 million votes already cast.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which is one of the most. And also at this point in time, the technology that we have to to steal someone's identity or something like that is a lot more risky now. There's a lot more risk.
They do talk about like voter ID laws and things like that in a very general sense, but the areas we can see the areas that a lot of these practices are implemented. They're not across the board always. They are in certain areas in certain cities, and many of those are inner city and happen to be areas of people of color. And so I think that's a problem. But that's kind of one way that systemic racism works its way into the voting system. I am really happy that millions of people have voted, millions of people more. I think it's like, at this point in time, there's like only 16 million people had voted in the 2016 election for early voting. And so you're 100% right. This is more people voting than I've ever heard about. And I think some of that has to do with the pandemic, which is another topic that we're not going to get to. But I would like for you to say a final word on what you want to say to what you'd like to say. But I think you should be clear on who you're saying it to. And so if you have a message for maybe other LGBT people who are Republican voters, or maybe your message is for people who are not Republican voters. What would you like to say?
So my message is to just everyone. I hope that you were able to find something that you agree with from each one of us, and I hope that you see that we're really not all that different, and that at the end of the day, we're all just humans, and we're all just, you know, we're only here for a little while, and then we're gone. Um, if you enjoyed the aspects of the conversation that I brought, you can follow me on YouTube
We're
at
gonna
Greek
put
in the
it on
City,
your. We're
and
gonna
that's
show
it.
it. We're gonna put it up on a
Yeah.
pop up.
So that's it. That's it.
So,
Have God bless you, and lots of love everywhere.
so a lot of the reasons that I will be voting for Trump, I know that we talked mostly about race issues and inequality issues and everything. On the same hand, foreign relations was very important to me that we didn't get to talk about. Economy was something that we didn't really get to talk about. Um, there is a lot of strife and division. I understand that I am an absolute minority vote when it comes to being a conservative person that's going to vote for Trump, but I want the people of color to know that when I say I love you, I mean it. I'm not casting my vote for Trump as a smear to you. That does not mean that I am not going to stop and listen and try to understand your stories or be proactive against racism or
Mhm.
any of those things. I don't want people of any. I really do want to bring unity. If Biden takes office, I want people to know that this America is so divided right now, and we're only going to get worse, and we're going to crash, and we're going to crumble unless we're able to come together. If Biden becomes president, I I personally will not be happy. And as an American, because I would vote against him, I will be able to express my discord, but that doesn't mean that I don't respect his platform and respect the position as a leader. And because we need unity, I will root for his success.
And
Yes, yeah.
I do want to add that I think that we should all be working together, Democrats and
Mhm.
Republicans.
I
You guys,
agree.
if you guys want to work on something here locally in Queens, and you think it's a project that me and the Republican Patriots could get involved in, and I could maybe bring it up at one of my discussions with them, I would love to maybe collaborate with a Democratic group or even
Let me give
just.
my final thought. Um, I appreciate both of you coming out to have this conversation. I wish it clear. I mean, to have a conversation about every single thing in politics in this short amount of time, I guess that was a mistake on my part. I do think that we had some uh, meaty conversation. Even though we didn't get every single thing on the list done, we left off religion and healthcare, the pandemic, and so many other things, gender equality. And so those are really important things that I wanted to talk about. Just because we didn't get to them doesn't mean that I don't think any of us don't about them. It just means that we ran out of time. I really do appreciate both of you coming to talk to me about these issues tonight. I understand that politics can get heated and very passionate. And I'm really happy that we were able to have this kind of conversation. I'm so sorry that we ran out of time, but I'm happy that you were able to at least get some of your opinions in and
Zero apologies. Thank you
just
for this opportunity. You're
closer
amazing.
to,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's fun.
And so I'm glad that we were able to come to a little bit of a common ground. For those of you watching, I really wanted to do this to just kind of set the table for how I think things should be going after November 4th. Hopefully by then we will have some type of a decision. Uh, no matter what, it's going to take people sitting down and having conversations with each other and really understanding each other. And that's more than just hyperbole. We can't just be like, love one another. It really does mean that I'm going to have to understand you in a way that you didn't expect, and you're going to have to understand me in a way that you weren't necessarily prepared to, but you're committed to doing. I really do want each of you to work to finding other people in your community that you're not necessarily like. Follow people on your timeline in your social media that don't necessarily have the same views as you. Try to engage in civil conversations with them. On the internet, it might get kind of spicy, so be ready. But do it with compassion and understanding and knowing that you are open and ready to understand people and bring something to the table that isn't necessarily there. But if you're going to bring something, know that someone else has to bring something too. And it might not be the dish you were going to eat. It might be a dish you don't really like, but it's at the table. And that's how we all can have a beautiful meal. I don't know why I turned it to food. I really want to thank each of you for watching this video. Please make sure you follow Paul and Chris. Their socials are listed right here. And you are absolutely amazing. I am going to continue to fight for equality regardless of who becomes president, although I have already cast my vote for Biden. I am so used to fighting for equality in the best of times and the worst of times. I come from a long line of people who have been doing it way before I ever even heard of it. And so I will carry that torch. Hopefully, we will have some people join the fight. Some new people join the fight. Maybe 2 new people join the fight. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I love you all. Goodbye. So, as you can see, this conversation didn't necessarily go. We ran out of time. Maybe I bit off more than I could chew. Maybe I tried to have more conversation in one little segment than I should have. I do think it was an important conversation to start. I'm not sure if it ended with anyone really being able to come to any new sense of understanding. There's a whole lot of things that I wanted to say that got left out. Believe me, I'm aware of it, so don't even try it in the comments. But overall, this wasn't about zinging a Trump supporter or proving them wrong or forcing them to think like me. This was about coming to the conversation and to the table with an open heart and open mind, which I believe needs to happen. There's times to fight for our rights. There's times to argue. There's times to hold people accountable for the things they said and done. And I think doing it with grace and compassion is something that I have always tried to do. And this time is no different than any other time before. So if you are following me, if anything, and my story has resonated with you, it's because I have done it with grace and class and dignity and tried my best to. And so if you were here for it then hopefully you're here for it now. I need to have a part 2 of this conversation. I want to talk to more people, and I don't know if I'll be able to do it before the election, but I implore you to have these conversations with people in your lives, because there might be somebody, there probably is someone who doesn't think like you, who's on a different political spectrum than you. Please have conversations with them. Please go to them with an open heart and open mind, and know that no one, we're not all trying to kill each other. We really do want to learn from each other. And we hopefully will be able to see the value in that. Thank you so much for watching the video. Hey everyone, just a quick reminder that this week's Pep Talks, I have special guest Sasha Velour, and we're chatting about the movie Boomerang. We're moving this week's episode to Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern so that we can all put our full attention to the election. Once again, I hope you'll join me and Sasha here live on Twitch this Wednesday, the 4th, at 7 p.m. Eastern. See you then.